did you hear the voice message that I sent you of the recording app
I
I took at work?
I haven't yet heard it. Carly did.
Okay.
She
Did
wasn't
she
that
get
scared.
freaked?
She wasn't that
Okay.
scared.
When I re-listened to it, I was like, that's not that scary. And the scary part was actually how the girl at work was telling me, and she was using visual clues
Hmm.
to show me the little girl's face through the
Okay.
hole like this. And I was like, I'm gonna fucking lose myself. That's terrifying. But
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I haven't listened to it yet, but I will. I will after this.
okay, when you
So
listen, imagine me going like this.
it will be burned forever in my memory, and I'll tell you why. Because I had
Okay.
no point of reference. I haven't listened to the story. And you're like, when she did this, and I'm like, did she Vogue? Like what was happening? Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple of spooky dooky stories to tell you that happened IRL.
Oh my God.
Um, I know. I think I kind of briefly touched on it last time we were recording, and I did end up telling Carly because she's my partner, and if she's burning with curiosity, I can tell her. But she's very adamant about the fact that I had to make sure that I told it in the next recording because I said I would, and there's gonna be people out there listening that are gonna want to hear it. So I feel like there's a lot of talk up. It's not that
Hmm.
exciting, but
Hmm.
something happened, and things don't always happen to me.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think I may have told it to you, Kim, but then we didn't record it. Maybe not though. Um, so this would have been right, like basically right in the pocket when we stopped recording, like September, maybe mid-September. And we were taking our dogs to doggy daycare. And usually usually we'll go together or like I will be actually I think it might even have been a no, it wouldn't have been a day I was dropping Carly off. Or anyways, she works there in the winter. So I may have been dropping her off. I may have just been dropping the dogs off, not entirely sure. But anyways, so whatever, do the drop off. And the location is very strange as to where the doggy daycare is because it's like this big warehouse, but only a small section of it is the doggy daycare, and then there's other businesses. And you can't, like, off of the main street, you can't even get into the building. You have to drive behind it. And the road is always so bad. It's like full of potholes, all torn up, just like a
Hmm.
really rundown area. And the city never does anything about it. In fact, the actual doggy daycare, it says like, don't like our back roads? Well, call the city. We don't like them either. So like, but when I told Carly, she explained to me because I wasn't sure what the building was sort of behind the doggy daycare area, which is relevant to the story. So when I told her, she's like, "Oh yeah, that's like a police training area, or like there's like a building where
Hmm.
like cadets and stuff." So I was like, "Oh, I had no idea." Because every time I would be there, as I said, it's kind of like run down. It's like behind the building, or sorry, in the back of the building. Um, and so like to me, it just kind of looked like a derelict building. Apparently it's not, but it's very Winnipeg. I just assumed it was a derelict building. And there's and there's this like there's this fencing, and I kid you not, like there's no one ever there. Like I've never seen anybody there ever. Um, and so do the drop off, and I'm gonna back up and go back home or back to work. And I do the checks that you usually do. um I didn't like in the Carly's backup camera is always a little bit dirty because she's driving out in the country and stuff, so I don't really see anything in the camera, but it's often kind of blurry anyways. So I do the turnaround to take a look, and I casually see a man sort of in the back, kind of behind the fencing by the building. I didn't really think anything of it whatsoever. I was just like, okay, there's someone there. And it was earlier morning. So I was like, maybe it's that people come in more in the morning. That's why I've not seen people before. So all fine and good. I go to pull out, and then I take a look back. There's nobody there. There's nobody there at
Hmm.
all. It's not even like in the spot that he was in, and the amount of time between when I first looked and when I looked again, there's no way that he could have the door he would have had to walked around the building into the door. So I would have seen him further along.
Why does this happen?
I don't know.
Why does this happen? Can that just reminds me, yesterday, driving back from the zoo, I'm in the driver's seat. Franny is backwards facing in
Hmm.
her car seat behind the passenger seat. So I can just like turn my head, look behind, and see her car seat, right? And like
Hmm.
her little feet kicking the back of the seat. I was on the highway, turned around really quickly, not to look at her, but to just check blind spots and what have you to
Hmm.
make a merge. And I saw her sitting up in the seat, like forward facing, really high. And I
What?
knew that couldn't be possible because she's strapped in.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, my mind is playing tricks on me.
Right.
Like, because I know that not to, I can see in the camera that I'm looking in that is facing her face that she is in her seat.
Hmm.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to look back again to see what would have made me think that that was her sitting up. Like, is there a blanket draped or something? I looked back again really quickly because I only had a few seconds, got to keep my eye on the road, saw it again.
And it was definitely
Saw it
Franny.
again. It
It
was
wasn't like,
her. In like a quick glance, it was her, a bit larger, but her sitting up high, forward facing. And then I like looked in the camera that's on her instead of some people have mirrors. I have a camera. She's totally there, just playing along, like totally fine. Wasn't she wasn't there. It's it was crazy. I was like, I looked twice and I saw this.
weird.
Then I looked again, it was just nothing. There was no sweater hanging. There's nothing.
What's I feel especially creepy about that is that like that seems like something mimicking Franny, right? Like mimics freak me out.
Mimics are weird. I didn't feel like a mimic. It was just like I was catching an image of her larger in a different part of time. Like, I don't know.
You saw into the future, that's what you're saying.
Maybe I did. Maybe I
Huh.
did.
Maybe that's what
Okay,
deja vu is.
what's your next one? What's your next story?
I think we just completely breezed past me. I think that's what deja vu is. But anyways,
Oh,
looking into the future. Anyways, okay, next story. It's it's really Carly's story, but she's too shy to tell it. But so
hmm.
she works on the farm and she's starting up her season. And she said kind of near the end last season when she was like kind of shutting things down or, you know, doing the last minute getting things ready for winter, um, she would constantly feel like someone was walking up to her, which is not that unusual because there's two people that live on the farm. It's their farm. They often have apprentices or doing mentorship or like there's people on the farm often. Their close friends are there. So it wouldn't be odd for someone to walk up and just say hi or be walking past her, whatever. So she didn't really think much of it. But when she looked up, there's nobody there. No one at all. But she could feel the presence as if someone was walking towards her. And it happened more than a few times where she was like certain she could feel a person
Hmm.
there, but there's absolutely no one there. So then recently, I'm trying to remember if I remember the story correctly. I know she's going to tell me I'm not telling it right. But, anyways, um, she was working in the field and she had that feeling again. I'm pretty sure is how she said it. And then she looked over to there's this like little area where it's like compost toilets that are like they're like literally like a little shack basically. And then but they're on like a little deck. And then connected to that is sort of where her freezer is for her not connected to the toilets, but just in the same area. A little freezer for her produce and stuff. And there's a little spot where people can sit, like a little um I don't know, what would you call it? Bench, I guess, a little bench. And she said she looked over and there was just like an old woman sitting there.
Oh my
Just
God.
yeah. And again, I don't think her first thought was, "Oh, there's a ghost," because
No.
there is a lot of people that come and go. And Matt, who's one of the owners, his mom's there often. Like maybe it could have been one of her friends or whatever. But then when she looked back, old lady was gone.
Did she cry? Because that's terrifying.
She said it didn't feel scary.
Good.
She just felt like the
Hmm.
energy was just there, like hanging out. And she's pretty certain that the farm is
Hmm.
haunted because, like she's out there by herself often, like planting and sort of off into that one area of their property. And yeah.
Can we go there and camp?
Yeah, actually they're on there's like an app that's similar to Airbnb, but it's like camping and they're on that. So like yeah, you could.
We should do that. We
All right,
should
well
go there and
just
camp
maybe come to Winnipeg. Yeah.
and have a spooky day.
Yeah. Just need to get on a plane.
It's easy as one, two, three.
It's not like you're taking care of a small child
No,
who can't even let you go to the bathroom.
she cannot.
Kim sent me a
Mhm.
video and it was very clearly being shot from her on a toilet. And I believe that Luna, her dog, was in the bathroom. And
Probably.
all you could hear was Franny, her daughter, just banging the door and being like, "Ah!" as if like, her entire world was crashing down. Kim can't even
In that moment,
fucking
it was.
can't even go pee for 30 seconds.
It was a poo.
Oh, well, okay, so I mean then it's
It was a poo.
valid. Can't even poo for 10 minutes.
Can't even poop. Can't even drop a deuce.
And like you
Hmm.
need to poop. It's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least once a day.
I
Hmm.
have one more quick story that I had forgotten about. This one's real
Tell it to
quick.
me. I need to know.
So we are looking at properties. We probably won't buy for some time, but we did get a pre-approval. So we're just kind of taking a look at what's out there. And so we went to look at a property and inside, like the house needed a good amount of work in the basement. And there were some things questionable that were like, oh, I'd probably want to get like an building inspector in here just to make sure that things are up to code because we're not entirely sure. So it's kind of like up in the air whether it would even be something we considered, but the property was big enough, like it was kind of designed the way we wanted. There were some outbuildings. There's a lot of positives as well too. So when we were in the house and we're looking around, it's like, okay, like not bad. There's some things that might not work, but maybe it's worth getting a building inspector in. And then we walked out, like out into the field, and there was a fence around it. It like I think maybe 3 acres of it or 2.5 acres were fenced, and then the rest wasn't. So we kind of went to right where the fence separated each pieces of the land, and we're standing there, we're looking out, and we're talking, me and Carly. And all of a sudden, I felt like my stomach kind of do this flop, like this weird, uncomfortable, like intuition feeling. And
Hmm.
I knew right away. I said to Carly, I'm like, I'm feeling a bit spooky, right? Like I'm feeling like ghosty right now, or like
Hmm.
supernatural. Like something is really not feeling good. And she's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I was like, "Yeah." So, anyways, I walked back. I'm talking to the real estate agent. Carly had gone further into the field to take a look to try to figure out where kind of the lines were, where the field would end. Um, and so again, we were kind of weighing whether or not it would make sense to get a building inspector and whether this was even something we would consider. And that would be like me with her mom and the realtor. Anyway, so she comes back from the field and we get in the car and I'm like, okay, so what do you think? And she's like, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. She's like, land wise, it would make sense. If we could get a building inspector and everything was okay, like it might be okay. And, we could slowly make renovations if we needed to. And it's the right location. She's like, but something just doesn't feel right. And I was
Hmm.
like, okay, well, I'm like, if that's how you feel, then obviously there's no need to keep discussing because if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. And so we drive back into town, and that is about 45 minutes back home into the city. And as we're getting closer to the city, Carly's like, I don't think I realized how tense I was and like how clenched my stomach was. And I feel like it's only just releasing now as we're heading back into the city away from that property.
Hmm.
And I said to her, I also feel like there was severe energy, and it wasn't in the house. It was on the land.
Hmm.
And I don't even think we realized how badly it was impacting us until we drove away from it. It was very strange.
You should research. Or
Yeah.
like, can you ask the realtor about like, is there someone buried on that land?
She'd be like, "Are you going to buy this house?" And we're like, "No." She's like, "Well, I'm not going to look into that for you. Not going to
No,
make any
ma'am.
money."
No, ma'am. I'm directly gonna delete this email.
Mhm. So anyway,
Goodbye.
some spooky dooky things are happening to us. It's like you just open the door to possibility and then the ghosty spookies walk in.
That's weird as fuck.
Yeah.
That's weird as fuck.
And Carly said she
Um,
really felt like it had something to do with the kids because there was kids there. Like kids lived in that house. And she's like, I just got this vibe that had something to do with the kids. And I was like,
weird.
yeah.
I don't like it.
No, it was really weird. So, anyways, hi. Welcome to Ghosts, I guess. We very rarely, right off the top, give you the ghost stories. We usually make you listen to a bunch of BS and you have to skip through to get to the good stuff. But there you go, right out of the gate, you get some good stuff. Yeah. So we're two Canadian ladies and we get together to talk about weird supernatural shit that doesn't seem to have a place in normal conversation. We talk about our own experiences, invite other guests to share theirs, and at the end of every episode, we will discuss how much our conversation stories convinced us, or didn't, to believe in the paranormal. So, do we believe in ghosts? Hard to say, but please join us as we talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Kim's gonna tell us some spooky spookies today.
I don't know if I'm gonna tell you some spooky spookies, but I am gonna talk
Creepy
about
creepies?
creepy creepies,
Spooky creepies?
spooky dookies, if you will.
Okay.
I'm gonna take
Spooky.
you on a journey, Rachel. I'm gonna take you
I'm
on a journey.
I'm ready.
Okay, you and the audience of five. Someone. There's a sir from India who listens. I'm
Well,
calling
then
out
we
to you,
then
sir.
then we have six people because Carly and I were walking the dogs before this, and I said, "Oh yeah, all four people." She's like, "I can count on a full hand how many people listen." There's five people. I was like, "Okay, well, I said four." She's like, "Yeah, but there's five, and one of them wasn't our fan from India." So, hello,
Oh,
sir. I shouldn't.
sir?
Maybe I shouldn't
I'm pretty
assume
sure I get a
gender.
feeling it's a sir. I get a feeling it's a sir from India.
Well, in case it's not, hello, our fan from India. You are our lucky number six, and this one goes out to you.
We're dedicating this one to you, sir. Or
Or
not.
not, or not.
I don't know. Sir or whatever. Okay. Rachel, you just sit back
I can't wait.
and relax. I'm gonna take you on a journey here, okay? You know how we're talking about before we hopped on mindfulness meditation, guided meditation?
Yeah,
Close your eyes. I'm gonna do it.
that seems scary. I think I'm just going to listen intently and quietly.
Close your eyes. This is a ghost podcast. You're supposed to be scared.
I'm scared.
Okay. Okay. So imagine you pull back the sheets on your cozy bed and you slide in for the night. Okay, you with me?
Hmm.
You're laying on your back, and even though the lights are off, you still have a sense of the room around you. You can trace the shadows across your nightstand. Let's just say it's to the right, wherever it is. It's got a set of drawers. Maybe they're at the end of the room. You can see the shape of the bench seat at the end of your bed, piled with not dirty, not clean clothes. There's a chair in the corner of the room, and it's empty, save for a sweater draped over the back. You with me?
Hmm.
It's all there in shades of gray to black, often becoming clearer and more distinct as your eyes adjust. Now, imagine for a second that you're laying there on your back in this very familiar bedroom. Your eyes are open. I need your eyes closed.
You want me to close my eyes? Okay. Also, are you
What?
describing your bedroom?
Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, follow along. Okay. You're laying on your back in your very familiar bedroom with all of the lights off, and you suddenly start to feel a sense of doom, a slightly growing terror, a discomfort and anxiety that something is horribly wrong. So, whether you have a partner in the bed beside you or an animal, it's irrelevant. You know that something else, perhaps someone else, is now in the room with you. The fear grows and is now gripping your chest as the static, familiar shadows in your room begin to change. You try to convince yourself that your eyes are playing tricks on you. You hope that the shadow growing at the foot of your bed is something that a few blinks will just wash away. You blink harder, faster. It doesn't work. With each blink, the shadow becomes more defined, more undeniably distinct. As the shape grows vertically, the blurred form solidifies right before your eyes into the silhouette of an insidious and gnarled woman. And now she's so close that she could touch your feet. The panic and terror reaches a level that you haven't felt before. You're in complete panic and disbelief, and you need to scream. You need to run. You need to turn the lights on, anything to protect yourself and escape from the old hag leaning over the foot of your bed. But Rachel, you can't move. You can't scream. You can't do anything except lay there on your back and watch as the woman slowly makes her way onto the bed and up your legs and onto your chest. She's pressing on you with such enormous, crushing weight, and you're surrounded by her darkness. You try to scream, but you can't. You keep thinking inside your head, why can't I just scream? Why won't noise come out? Not even a feeble rasp can escape. You can feel the tightness balling in your throat, begging to be released. You think to yourself, she's taking me. This just can't be real. And then something inside your mind shifts. You blank long and firmly and swallow the screams one more time before whispering, I have to wake up from this nightmare. And in a blink, literally, you feel the pressure on your chest release. You feel the lump in your throat soften. The room shifts slightly. It's the same as before in essence, yet slightly different in a few ways. The most important of which is that the hag is gone and you can move freely again. Clearly, it was all just a horrible dream, but you can't quite explain why you could see everything happening around you so clearly. Open your eyes. Has that happened to you before?
No.
What?
No.
That has never happened to you.
No, but it made me feel uncomfortable. Very good storytelling.
Well, that would make me feel very okay. So I'll keep going on. So what I've just walked you through is a very common and universal experience referred to. I mean, it's common to everyone I know, but whatever, maybe not to Rachel.
Well, I should say, like, my ex he would have them all the time.
Okay. Okay. So
And
you're,
I know Carly's
yeah.
had similar things. So like I'm around people who have experienced them, but I have not.
Okay. Well, you just experienced it. Hmm. So it's a universal experience, referred to, at least in my neck of the woods, as an old hag. Or in other cultures, I have found it's called a witch riding.
Mm.
I think that's the southern US. Um, in one culture, it was a sneaky mouse trying to steal your breath. That was actually Eastern China or Eastern
Cute.
Chinese folklore.
Mm.
It is kind of cute, huh? It becomes powerful when it steals your breath. Um, it's also described as a ghost pressing on your body, which was also Chinese culture.
Mm.
I don't know how to pronounce this properly, but it was Gawi Nulim, which means being pressed by something scary. Hmm.
Mm.
Often a ghost or spirit in a dream, and that's Korean. Um, Kar Daran in Mongolian culture means to be pressed by the black,
Mm.
and Bengali refers to this as boba, which means speechless,
Mm.
which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, the theme is often a malevolent entity, goblin, animal, spirit, aliens, a woman, usually an ugly one, um, that is using force to steal, frighten, or try to take you or something from you.
Mm.
Some cultures have added elements, which are interesting, whereas the entity wears, like, one would wear a golden fez hat. And if you can steal it, this is so interesting to me. If you can steal it while being crushed, then you get great rewards. And in some cases, it's like if you can do this while you're being, paralyzed by the thing, it,
Right.
it will become your slave, etc. So where I'm from, the old hag is both what I'm experiencing and the thing that I'm seeing.
Okay.
So I can say I've had an old hag or I've been hagged, and it usually is, you know, the entity is also called an old hag, whether or not it looks like one.
Can I ask it just a
Um,
quick question? I know you want me to make notes and
yes.
discuss later, but
Yeah.
with that specifically, if you had uh, I guess, a dream where you were not able to move and, other things were happening, it wasn't necessarily this woman who appears, it's just something else that's scary and you're unable to wake up, you're unable to move or speak or scream or whatever. Is that still an old hag if there's no old hag?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's my next. Hold your questions, Rachel, because
Sorry.
my next line is most often what I'm seeing is a dark, misty shadow.
Mm. Okay.
And I've seen it both pressing on me and extruding from someone else in the bed with me.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a weird one. Um, Sometimes I've had an old hag where I've seen multiple bodies or shapes at the end of the bed, tiny figures that I've interpreted to be like, oh, it's a little alien. And sometimes I've seen grouped spirits of all my deceased family gathering and watching over.
Oh.
Um, and this was, I would say that was like one of the only warm and like loving old hags I've had.
Hmm.
I've and what I found is there is a way for me to escape old hags and remove the terror element while I'm in them. And that's through like recognizing that I'm actually having one and making
Mm.
light of it, like making a joke or making light of the scenario. Um,
Like a boggart.
yes, exactly, like a boggart from Harry Potter, and it works. So being humorous works. So I'll say something like, "Oh, here we go again, time to like frighten the shit out of Kim," and
Hmm.
I'll just be like, "I don't have time for this. Like, I don't have time for this." And sometimes when it's not scary at all, I'll stop and be present and explore in the old hag.
Oh, interesting.
Like, emotionally. So I guess maybe a lucid dream, but also like experience a bunch of other stuff. And then I find that the more I relax into it and like surrender, the clearer things become. And I can actually speak. And like, you know how the screams couldn't come out in an old hag, but I can speak
Right.
during them when I make
Hmm.
light of them. So, for example, one time with the little people at the end of the bed, I was like gasping audibly. It was scary, and it I was alarming John, we'll say.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I sat upright or not. That might have been something else. But from what I can remember, he was like, "Are you okay?" And I said something like, "Oh yeah, they're here. Can't you see them? They're here and they're coming," kind of thing.
Yikes.
Which
That's
for him
terrifying.
is like terrifying, but for me, it was just like, obviously they're here. Like, can't you see them?
Hmm.
Like they're just playing tricks kind of thing. So it was like that lightheartedness was able to release me from the terror
Okay.
so I could interact with it more.
Right.
What I also find interesting is the more I engaged with John and that third person came in, the more I like came back to reality and lost sight of like the actual dream and transitioned
Hmm.
back to real life.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
a few other things I've noticed from my experiences, which seem to be supported by those who study like old hags or this type of like sleep paralysis, are that they occur while you sleep on your back and or going to bed with a full stomach, which is
Mm.
interesting. And in researching it, there's some there's some weight to it. Um, so long before I ever even had an old hag, my dad would say, "Oh, you can't eat that right before bed. You can't have a big meal, etc., because it'll give you bad dreams." And
Hmm.
then he explained that his explanation was that your body is supposed to be at rest and sleeping, but your stomach is working hard to digest, and then it causes this like sleep-wake confusion and it'll give you a nightmare.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but like that, it's interesting when I find something that is true or works for me, and then you see it in the research or like a study, and you're like,
Hmm.
huh, it's actually real. And hmm,
Not so unlike my
um,
OCD.
yeah, very much similar. So the old hag in particular seems to be a bout of sleep paralysis, which is being physically immobile but mentally conscious, mixed with a hypnagogic hallucination.
Hmm.
So it's two of those elements combined because sleep paralysis on its own mixed with the hallucination. And the hypnagogic hallucination, I hope I'm saying that right, um, occurs in a state between waking and sleeping. So the
Hmm.
hallucination can involve all of the senses, not just seeing an image. Have you ever been like on your way to sleep and you like hear a bell ringing or something? And it feels like the
Yeah.
most bell you've ever heard. Yeah. So that's a
Yeah.
hypnagogic state. And a lot of people experience it, but mixing that with sleep paralysis in a dream state is your old hag, basically.
Yeah, recently, like very recently, I was asleep. I think it was just this like Saturday morning, and I thought I could hear like someone banging. And I was
Yeah.
like, what the hell? And like I live in the city, so sometimes there's shit going on. And I was like, who's banging? And then I woke up and there was no banging. There's no banging
No,
whatsoever.
no, there's no banging. There's no banging.
There was no
That's just a
banging.
hypnagogic state. Now you know.
Yeah.
Now you know. That type of hallucination occurs in up to 70% of the general population.
I'm in that 30%.
No, you're in the 70% because you heard that you had a
Banging.
hallucination.
But I've never had the old
Yes.
Hague.
No, that's different.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
The hypnagogic state, the hallucination mixed with sleep paralysis, like not being able to move, that creates the old hag.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Um, it is found that the lifetime prevalence of hallucinations combined with sleep paralysis is around 30%.
Mm.
So you're in the 70
I'm always in the
because
70s. Just
and
a
they
basic bitch.
just a basic bitch. So happens far less for sure. Um, and it referred to it as this study that I read referred to it as the incubus phenomenon. So not an old
Mm.
hag,
Mm-hmm.
but an incubus.
Interesting. Which is
So
like a demon? You know, a succubus is something to do with sex. It's an incubus.
I think I read the incubus. Okay, so this might be different from what I read, but it was like in relation to old hags, a mare would is like a woman that would leave her body while she slept and go and terrorize others. And they put that back to incubus or succubus or whatever. And it is
This
related to sex somewhere.
this is an incubus is a demon in male form
Male form,
that
and a succubus is
seeks
female.
that seeks to have sexual intercourse with sleeping women.
Woo woo.
The corresponding spirit in female, I'm assuming, is going to be succubus. And I'm
Mm,
citing Wikipedia on this one. Yeah, the female form is succubus.
hmm,
There you go.
great.
But when you're having
So,
it, does it feel sexual?
not for me, no.
No.
No, but that is definitely common in the experiences for sure.
Mm.
For sure, it is a part of it. So, sleep and sleep disturbances are clearly like they're well studied, and I've seen dream states defined and contrasted and compared with lucid dream states and hypnagogic states and sleep paralysis and then wakefulness or whatever. And I'm sure there are theories and people have like dedicated their lives and careers to exploring like the features and the mechanisms for what we are experiencing. So there's people out there who are going to say, you're doing this. This is what's happening in your brain. But I'm going to throw this out there just for
I'm
you,
ready to
Rachel.
receive it. Yep. Just me
Excellent.
and the six.
I and India. Um, I often talk a lot about the conflict between my logical, analytical, skeptical brain
Uh-huh.
and then my pure, subjective, spiritual, paranormal experiences, right?
Yep.
That side of my brain and how they conflict. And the two they're just at constant odds. And in fact, part of the reason why I'm obsessed with doing our podcast is I get to like, it forces me to recognize this and explore it. And then
Mhm.
also remember the details of my ghost stories as they happen and like the feeling as they happen, because that just gets erased almost from my memory.
Mm.
So, my question to you is what degree do you think these sleep hallucinations are tapping into other things, if any at all?
Yeah, I mean, like, I have a whole page of questions, and that is part of it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I guess as I've not had those before, like the old hags,
Mm-hmm.
or something similar, where it's both things of the hypnagogues or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hypnag, yeah.
Hypnagogic? Jogic? I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Stranger Things. But anyways, um, since I've never personally experienced it, but I was with a person who had them frick all the time. And I will say, often after going to bed with full stomach. So that is
Hmm.
um a part of me a part of me feels like it's sleep paralysis. It's connected to sleepwalking. It's, you're in that space between sleep and dreaming, and like your dreams can be completely wild and crazy. Like they can be anything. So it doesn't seem if that's my initial take on it. Is that just like you're sort of waking up from sleep, but you're not quite awake. So you don't have full function of your body, but your mind is able to create something. And then you're just kind of stuck. until you wake up. And like when you talked about John and you said when you brought someone in or when that third person was in talking to you, eventually you just kind of came to, like that would happen with Josh too. And actually what would happen is that he would just wake up screaming, like screaming to the point where like it was jarring. And like there were times where he would run out of bed. Like
Hmm.
it, and that would happen probably like twice a week if I was going to put an average on it. Like it happened a lot.
Hmm.
And um and he would have problems breathe with his breathing as well too. And yeah, so my only experiences with it is seeing it with someone else. So I lean more to but at the same time, it opens up a bigger question because what's happening when we're dreaming? Like, what is that? That is a state of consciousness that we have no idea what that is or what it could potentially tap into when we're calm and open and like what can come in, you
Right.
know? So, if there is, I don't know, I guess I'm more on the skeptical side with this one.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I'm kind of going back and forth like the way that you live your life. Um, because I think it would be, it's like the near death experiences. If there's like, you know, a large number of people, and that's very common occurrence for a lot of different people, it's like, well, what's happening? Like
Right.
what makes that, and the other thing I wrote down is like, are you connecting to like in that space between full sleep and dreaming, when you're like semi-conscious, we'll say, are you connecting to another spiritual plane or um, another conscious plane, or are you in some place where, our understanding of the world is different? Like, I don't like using different dimensions and different universes because that sounds kind of like whatever. But yeah, I think like we are all, I feel like you cannot argue that the human is just full of energy and matter, right? And the world is made up of energy. So like I've always felt like you can tap because you're made up of what the world is made up of. Given the right conditions, you can tap into something. And I do believe that. So it's like scientifically, is it just sleep paralysis or some version of sleepwalking or I don't know, like your dad said, you go to bed with full stomach and then your body's trying to digest and like it throws your brain off, or like is it purely just a function or a reaction that your body is having that's just purely scientific? Or what would the beings be? Maybe I'll bounce that back to you. Like, do
Yeah.
you think, is it a dream? Is it a spirit? What is it?
Do you know what was interesting to me to think about is I have a visual of the room.
Yeah.
Like that's the piece that really gets me. It's just like you were there. You're in the
Hmm.
room and your eyes are closed, but you can see this room.
Hmm.
And it doesn't just happen in my bedroom. Like it will happen in a new place that I'm not so familiar with as well. And it's just like, how can I see this happening in front of me?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely like
Mm.
something to think about. I'm going to be devil's advocate and say, like, your brain and your eyes and every sense that you have is
Hmm.
taking things in completely all the time. And can only, you only have so much space to be fully aware of everything that's coming in and that you're processing. And I feel like as you go from being a baby into an adult, like that, the ability to do that, like to connect with what you're seeing and remember, gets even smaller. But when you're asleep, that's your subconscious. So it's like, can it access those things that like waking Kim might not be able to say, oh, the closet is over there in this hotel room and there's the bathroom is over there, but like the subconscious Kim who walked into the room and surveyed and saw everything, can that person access
Yeah.
that? Or part of you rather?
It's
It's not a separate person.
it's a very interesting thing when it happens, but it's much more enjoyable now that I can not be terrified,
Mm-hmm.
or that there is a certain point where I can realize this isn't this is this is a dream, right? That makes it easier
One thing that I thought
for
of when you're
sure.
talking about your eyes being closed but being able to see everything is when I've told this story already, but when I got, I think it was my tonsils out or my it was my tonsils. When I got my tonsils out and they just like put me under, I could see everything. It was like I
Hmm.
was up in the corner of the room. I could see the doctors, I could hear everything. Yeah, it was like my eyes were wide open and I was hovering above everybody, but I was absolutely completely out with my eyes closed. So how does that
Interesting.
even happen?
It's because consciousness isn't tied to your physical body.
Yeah, and your sight.
Yeah, that's why. And I think I'm just coming to terms with that as a more radical yet confirmed statement. But I wish I'd read more into this so I can get you some quotes. But maybe I'll just post the video when I post this. I'll post it on our social media, the video that I'm referencing here, and they don't butcher it as poorly, but there's a radiation oncologist who has studied NDEs his entire career,
Hmm.
basically, and has come to terms with the fact that the consciousness exists outside of the mind and the physical body,
Mm,
which then leads you to understand NDEs and leads you to accept that the consciousness does exist past bodily death.
mm,
And they had some scientific proofs for this, which was they were very compelling. And one
mm,
was when they put people under for this one particular surgery, they put a clicking in the ear
mm.
or
Okay.
something, and they can tell when the brain stops receiving that clicking noise, like when it can no longer hear it.
Okay.
And then people will still report the NDEs, or they'll still report what happens.
Mm,
So the consciousness is able to pick up on those things without the brain being able to receive or hear what's going on in the room or whatever. Like
hmm.
brain is stopping from being able to accept that. But I'll send that to you and I'll post it
Yeah,
when I
that's
post
wild.
this one because it's really cool evidence. There's a lot of really cool evidence.
Yeah, and I'm
What else you
just,
got for questions?
well, no, I'm just thinking through what you said. It's like if consciousness lives beyond the body, then it could, I guess a story that it made me think of is when I was a kid. And when my father told me this, I just want to be clear, it scared the bejesus out of me because I was very young, too young to hear him say this. He lived in an apartment. I guess he could go up onto the roof.
Hmm.
He went up on, well, he smoked, so maybe he's up there smoking. I have no idea. But he went up onto the roof and he told me that he was standing there and he could feel his body. Oh no, I'm confusing two stories. Sorry. I'm confusing two stories. In this instance, he was laying in bed, and that's more relevant to the other story. So sorry, he was laying in bed and he said he was kind of, he could feel his spirit lifting out of his body. He said
Hmm.
he could feel it. And he was like, "Nope, I'm not ready." And then all of a sudden he just was like
It
back
snapped back in.
into his physical self.
It goes back to Jill Bolte Taylor. I think that's her name.
Yeah.
Remember that TED Talk where she
Yeah.
was the stroke
Hmm.
and she was just like, it's out here and it's out here. And like, I don't think it can live and maintain connected to the body. Or I don't know. I think the body and the mind helps it express itself, but it definitely is a separate thing for me.
Yeah. And I'm also just thinking about like people who claim that they're able to astral project, well, like when they get to a
Right.
certain amount of meditative state, which would suggest
Yeah.
that your physical body stays in one place, but your consciousness goes completely somewhere else.
My friend Hannah, she swears that some of her dreams are visiting alternate realities, visiting alternate spaces. And like the second she told me about this idea and this feeling, I started having similar type of
Yeah.
dreams that they do not feel like other dreams. They feel radically different than every other dream you've ever had. And they are like crack. Like I cannot get enough of them.
Hmm.
I do not want to get out of bed. And they're not like it's just it is such a dopamine hit to have this type of dream. And I will remember it vividly and aggressively for days and weeks and months.
Hmm. That's wild.
So
We should
I
get her on.
love when I get them.
We should get her on the podcast to like talk a little bit about those experiences because that's
We should.
pretty nutty. Because like a lot of people, there's like a lot of you know people who've been studying meditation and Buddhism and spirituality and all of that for ever and ever and ever. And, they have to practice and practice and practice to get to any sort of astral projection. But Hannah just goes to sleep and astral projects. Like,
Well, maybe it's like it's just a matter of shutting down this cognitive, like this analytical side of your brain and just letting the
yeah.
spirit take over or letting the softer side take over. But
I do
yeah.
want to say that when you start talking and you said that you're there and you're trying to scream, but you can't scream and blah, 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 blah. I did immediately think of the movie Alien and the caption or the cat like the on the movie posters that sort of like quote from the movie. Do you know what it is?
Hmm. No.
It's in space, no one can hear you scream.
Oh.
So it's the first thing I thought of. It's a great movie. But that's neither here nor there. Um, I don't know, like I'm just thinking of when you were talking about how you experienced maybe I want to know more about the experience that you had where you saw this old hag or this like black smoky what
Mm.
have you coming out of the person beside you. That's my question, part of my question. The second is you kind of touched on it, that John has woken up and spoken to you and been really freaked out, but like if they wake up, can they can hear you talking, they can see
Hmm.
you moving, like what's typically happening?
Okay, so the first one with the smoke coming out was literally like I was having an old hag. So I
Mhm.
was in a state of sleep paralysis, visually could see everything in the room, had a sense of doom, terror, just like horrific. But I was facing my partner at the time who was laying on his back, and it was almost like instead of the darkness taking a crushing weight on my chest, I could see something like going into or being pulled out of his mouth that was black, like a black mist.
So are we talking ectoplasm?
Uh, I don't believe in ectoplasm, but
Neither do I,
there
but
was
like
like,
here we are. Weird
and
shit was coming out of his
I was
mouth.
just like, I was panicked because I knew I didn't want it to hurt him. I knew that that was bad. Whatever was happening, I was just like, this is so dark and bad, but I couldn't scream, couldn't wake him up, couldn't nudge him. And I was like, just trying so hard.
And so when you both woke up, you told him about it?
Yeah,
And what did he was he feeling anything weird? Was he having a bad dream? Was there anything, or was it just probably
I
your own
don't recall.
consciousness?
I
Okay.
I do not recall. Yeah,
Hmm.
do not recall. Yeah.
That's
What was
creepy.
the other one? You had another question about
Um,
pe
yeah, like when like so John's fully awake and then you might dart up and start saying something,
Oh,
but like does he hear you like you're trying to scream while this is happening? Does he hear you like thrashing and going like like is there anything that's happening? Or are you just like
no,
completely still?
when the true old hags happen, I don't think I'm moving at all.
That's
Like I
so
can't move.
weird.
You can't move because it's sleep paralysis, right? Like that's part of it. Um, except for the more recent ones where I'm starting to like engage.
Hmm.
So I have bad dreams all the time, and I talk in my sleep all the time. And I'll like sometimes I'll just bolt upright and scream, and like he'll be like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then I'll just lay back down. Those aren't old hags for me. An
Hmm.
old hag is like a very, very specific encounter that is happening. And usually when you wake up from one, you are like really terrified and really out of it and really a state of discomfort and
Mm.
uncomfortable for a while.
Hmm.
Until I got to this state where I kind of like make light of them, and that's a little bit better. But when I think back on it, I'm like, oh, that's creepy. That's a little creepy. Like with
Yeah.
the little, I call them aliens, but I don't know. They were like little people at the end of my bed, multiple. I think it was like four, five, or six. Like I don't even remember anymore. Um, and that was more like, of course you're here. Like, of course you're here. Of course I'm seeing this.
Hmm.
And that's when he was like engaging and he's just like, what are you talking about? So he just thought I was talking in my sleep and it wasn't making any sense. Yeah,
And so would you say that when you now that you can have some semblance of control in these situations or like to turn it around while it's happening, like that sounds to me like lucid dreaming, like that you have control over.
maybe. Maybe there is something, some like crossover with that.
Mm-hmm. Lucid dreaming would be an interesting thing to look into and talk about on this
Yeah.
podcast, I think.
But it's not like a dream where you're like somewhere and can interact. Like it is, I'm in my room and I'm seeing or feeling something, a presence in there
Mm-hmm.
with me. Yeah.
Like Carly, for instance, has the ability to lucid dream, and the minute something is happening to her subconsciously that she does not like, she can just be like,
Yes.
I'm just turning this around. I will not.
Yes. Yes. I have often I have dreams where I won't allow myself to see something difficult or to have something bad happen. Like
Mm,
if there's like a car crash about to happen and I know I can't handle that type of
mm,
anxiety in my dream. Oh, I'll just like, oh, it diverts last minute and like I'm
mm.
saved. And, like I have tons like that.
I don't have the ability to do that. However, there are often times where something's really distressing and about to happen, and I don't want to see it or deal with it in the dream. I wake myself up. Like, I'll just be like,
Good.
and then I'm like, oh, that was awful.
Yeah. Because it becomes too terrifying.
Yeah.
Too much discomfort.
I am very interested in dreaming in general because I don't really dream much. I'm not saying completely don't, but mostly I close my eyes and I'm out. I'm out and then I wake up.
Oh, wow.
And usually what I'll remember are like upsetting dreams. I don't really
Hmm.
remember a lot of good dreams.
My hope for you is that because the topic of alternate reality dreams has been raised to you as it was raised to me, you will now have them because they are so cool. They are so cool.
Like, are
It
you
is
just
like on
on a
another
different
level.
planet? You're just like on Mars and you're hanging out with
No, like
Martians.
you're a different person going through their daily life. And it feels so real. Like there's so much feeling associated and tied to it.
What if you're just
Like
like
one, I was like,
revisiting? Past
in a
lives.
loft in France, and I was the woman, and then there was a man there, and we had a baby, and like we were just like living our lives. But and that to me, if you described it, just sounds like a dream. Oh, you had a dream. But like,
Hmm.
no, this these things that I'm feeling are different in how they feel than my dreams. I can tell the difference, and subjectively, I can tell the difference, but I cannot describe to you why or how I know, other than the feeling. It's amazing. It is so fun. So fun. But yeah, that is my old hag. I told you I also wanted to read you a story from my Ghost Stories from Old Newfoundland book.
Let's do it. I'm
Can I
excited.
do that?
Of
So for
course.
the listeners, Rachel bought me a book called Screech Ghost Stories from Old Newfoundland.
Because Kim's from
And
Newfoundland, guys.
if you haven't already guessed,
She
I'm from there. Um,
doesn't presently live there.
no, no. And this book, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick a spooky story to read when I talk about old hags. And there is a story in here, as I suspected, about an old hag.
Tell me more,
And
tell me more.
tell me, Ma, did you get very far? Um, this book is by Charisse Cotter, art by Genevieve Sims. I'll read the book and maybe we'll post a link or something because it's adorable. But I'm going to give a trigger warning. Do
Okay.
you know why I'm going to give a trigger warning, Rachel?
I hope it's not like sexual assault or murder. Is it?
It's not. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Because me, a person with sensory issues,
Hmm.
being read to
Oh,
is
of course. Sure.
like motherfucking torture. Yet I'm doing this to you, knowing that if you did it to me, I would want to take this pen and drag it into my brain and kill myself.
For the
But I know
listeners,
you like it.
last time I was there, I tried to read a book to Kim, like just a child's book. And I was like, oh, come on. How bad could it be? Just listen, just try to enjoy it. And she got so squirmy and so upset. And it was a child's
Yeah.
book. There was like two sentences on each page. She made it like through maybe 1.5 pages. And then
Yeah.
she was done.
I was like, I am going, this is fucking torture.
I thought she
I
was going to
can't do it.
physically hurt me. Like I,
I, you could see my rage building where I was just like, it's so deep, deep discomfort.
mm,
And I'm
why?
surprised that I don't know. It's a sensory thing. Like I can't do it.
All
I
right.
cannot do it. I can listen to, oh, I love my audiobooks. I love them.
Isn't that
I
someone
love
reading
my
you a story?
podcasts. It is.
Huh.
It is.
So if someone
But
you didn't know, so if someone you don't know was reading you a story, that would be fine. It's when someone you do know is reading you a story.
mm, I don't know. But let's say we're sitting down, we're looking at the TV, and there's a description on the TV, and you try to read it out loud. I'm gonna fight you.
Wow.
I'm gonna fight you.
Mm.
Or if John tries to read something out to me that he's
Yeah.
holding, I'm like, I stop it. Stop. Let me read it myself.
Just imagine John's reaction. You're like,
He is a doll.
wow. His eyes get so
He's
wide. He's like, wow.
no, but he's a doll because he just accepts these sensory things that I have.
Yeah.
And
Leave
just
me and
he's just like,
Carly.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, let me read
Yeah.
this book. It's called A Visit from the Old Hag, Corner Brook, 1965. That was me clearing my throat.
That was horrible.
Sorry.
I hated it.
Andy Rose lay in bed, gazing at the full moon. It looked like a large silver dime climbing up through the bare branches of the tree outside his window. It was November, and the Roses had moved into the house on the hill 2 weeks before. It was a big old house with 3 floors and a basement surrounded by tall maple trees. The back garden ran down the hill to a brook. Andy had never slept in a room by himself until they moved into this house. In their old house, which only had 3 bedrooms, he had shared a room with his brothers, Jack and Steve. His 3 sisters shared another, and his parents shared a third. But this house had enough bedrooms so that each child could have their own, except his 2 younger sisters who wanted to stay together. Andy had chosen the small bedroom on the 3rd floor at the back overlooking the garden. Jack and Margaret, his older sister, each had a room on the 1st floor. At first, he was excited to be on his own. He arranged his collection of dinky cars. By the way, I just learned dinky. Do you know what a dinky is?
It's a penis.
No, it is not. A dinky is a little toy like Hot Wheels car. Did you know
Yeah,
that?
I did know that. I was making a
You
joke.
did. Okay.
When
Okay.
when a man is being
I said that.
particularly annoying, I say, "What a dink." And
Yeah.
I mean penis.
So I've referred to a dinky before and nobody knew what I was talking about. So that I wanted to clarify for, everyone. Um, so he arranged his dinky cars on top of his dresser and his comic books in neat piles on the small bookshelf that had been left behind by whoever had occupied the room before. He liked to just lie in his bed during the day and look out the window into the trees and out over the bay. He had a good view of this part of Corner Brook, of streets and houses and tall buildings downtown, with the mountains rising across the water. Their old house had been at the bottom of the hill with no view to speak of. But at night it was a little different. There were no curtains on his window yet, and this made Andy uneasy. The window formed a black, empty rectangle with no street lights to illuminate the darkness outside. The November weather had been cloudy and stormy, and this was the full night he could see the moon. The full moon. Andy sighed and turned over, so the moon was behind him. He found it hard to go to sleep without his brothers in the room. He found himself listening to every sound from downstairs, and this house seemed to do a lot of creaking, one way or another. Some noises he could explain. The furnace, far below in the basement, had a life of its own, and Andy could hear its distant rumbling when it came to life every so often as the house cooled down. But other noises were mysterious, scrapes and groans as if the house, just like Andy, was unable to sleep and was turning first this way and then the other on a rickety old bed. It was worse with the moon behind him. He felt it was staring at him. He flipped over again. The moon was just sitting there, glowing. It was a little higher in the tree now, a white disk marked with strange, shadowy shapes. He couldn't see a man in the moon tonight, nor a rabbit, as he could sometimes imagine, but just odd shapes. The mountains of the moon, he thought sleepily. That's what they were learning in science class, all about the mountains of the moon. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep dream about climbing the mountains of the moon, a thick rope strung around his shoulders, spikes on his heels, climbing higher and higher with the silvery surface of the moon far below. Something woke him. He wasn't sure what. A noise? His room was pitch black now. The moon was gone. Andy was afraid. His whole body felt scared, but he didn't know why. He knew where he was in his new room at the top of the new house, with his brothers and sisters and parents all fast asleep nearby. What was there to be afraid of? Nothing. But still, he was filled with a growing feeling of dread. It was just so dark, and he was all alone. He should turn on the light. That would help. All he had to do was reach over to the bedside table and switch it on. That was easy. At least it should have been easy, but it wasn't. Andy couldn't move his right arm. He could think about moving it, but it didn't budge. Maybe it was numb from the way he had been sleeping. He should use his left arm. His left arm wouldn't move either. Both his arms lay heavy at his sides. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to move them, not even an inch. Panic shot through him. What was happening to him? He tried to kick down through his legs to throw the covers off so he could sit up, but his legs wouldn't move either. They lay like 2 big tree trunks, solid and lifeless. The darkness seemed to thicken around him. Andy tried to turn his head, but his neck and head were as frozen as the rest of him. The only thing moving was the panic, rising in waves from deep inside, rising through his lungs and up to his throat, stopping his breath, making it hard to breathe. Why can't I move? He thought. Why can't I move? He tried to call out for help, but his throat was as immobile as the rest of his body. And then he heard a noise, a very small noise. It came from the hall, a creaking of floorboards, then another creak, and then another. Someone or something was moving slowly down the hall toward his bedroom door, step by step. I've got to get up, Andy was screaming inside and using every bit of his strength to move. He tried to wiggle his toes, nothing. He tried to kick his legs, nothing. He tried to lift his arms, move his fingers, turn his head, nothing happened. The fear filled him. The darkness in his room seemed to press down on him like a dead weight. And then a gleam of light burst out from the corner of his room. The moon, high above the tree now, slipping out from behind heavy clouds. As Andy lay there, his face toward the window, unable to move, he watched as the moon slowly emerged from the darkness around it, round and full and shining. A cold white light filled Andy's room. And as if the moon was a spotlight in a dark theater, it sent a shaft of light toward the door, illuminating the door handle. The soft footsteps stopped outside his door. The door handle slowly began to turn. Help, help, screeched Andy without making a sound. He tried again to move his legs. They wouldn't move. He tried with all his might to move his arms. They wouldn't move. He strained to turn his head so he could look away from that slowly turning door handle, but his head wouldn't move either. And then it opened. A deep darkness came through the door, and as soon as it got inside the room, it started to grow. It grew bigger and blacker, and then bigger and blacker still. The moon winked out, and the room was filled with a heavy, smothering darkness. It moved slowly toward the bed until it was right above Andy, pressing down on him, an enormous weight, squeezing his breath out of him. He had never been this scared in his life. He tried to move his legs. Nothing happened. He was completely frozen and still couldn't move or make a sound. And still, the darkness kept pushing him down into a deeper darkness. Just when he couldn't stand it for another second, when he knew in his heart that he was going to die, right there in his own bed, all alone in his new room, with his brother and sister sleeping peacefully down the hall, the clouds thinned around the moon, and a faint light diminished the darkness around him. For a split second, he saw her above him, sitting on his chest, a tiny, horribly ugly old woman wearing a raggedy black dress with long, black, scraggly hair falling all over her face and shoulders. She leaned down closer to him, and he could see her dark eyes, her long nose, and her toothless mouth wide open as she laughed at him, a rasping, screeching cackle. Then the clouds shifted again, and the room fell into blackness. Andy tried one last time to move. He concentrated on the baby finger on his right hand, trying with every ounce of his strength just to wiggle it. And suddenly the weight lifted, and the horrible little woman was gone. Andy rolled over, reached his arm out from under the blankets, and turned on the light. He kicked off the covers and sat up, his bare feet flat on the cold floor. He turned his head from side to side and lifted his arms and legs. Everything was working the way it should. He was panting and sweating, and he could still feel the fear jumping in his chest, but he was alive. He looked around his room. The door was closed. His clothes were thrown over the chair. One shoe was by the bed, the other was in the corner. His dresser drawers were hanging open. In other words, everything was just as he left it the night before. And yet everything looked slightly different. It was his familiar daytime room, and yet it wasn't. The light that came from his lamp had a gray emptiness about it that disturbed him. He kept glancing over his shoulder as if he might catch a glimpse of the terrible old woman again, but he was alone. Gradually, his breathing returned to normal, and that fluttering, fearful feeling in his chest subsided. He lay gingerly down on the bed again and pulled his blankets up to his chin. He tried to keep an eye on the door, the dark corners, and the window all at once. Nothing moved. There were no sounds. He closed his eyes. He didn't even think about turning off the light. He fell asleep.
Hmm.
The next morning, Andy woke to find his big brother Jack hauling the covers off him and telling him to get moving. He was late for breakfast. After he sat up and rubbed his eyes, Andy looked around the room, half expecting to see the old woman in the corner. "You're a sleepyhead this morning," said his mother. Then she took a close look at him. "Are you all right, Andy? You look pale." She leaned over and felt his forehead. "I'm okay," he mumbled. "I just had a bad dream last night." His father looked up at him from the newspaper. "It must have been a really bad one to make you look so dragged out this morning." "It was," says Andy, looking at his cereal. He didn't feel like eating a bite. It was horrible. "Now you eat that up," said his mother, starting to fuss. "What kind of dream could take away your appetite? You must be sick." "I'm not," said Andy. "It was just so scary I couldn't move, and this old woman came and sat on my chest." "Hold it right there, my son," said his father, giving his wife a sharp glance and folding up his newspaper. "Tell us from the beginning." Andy told them the whole thing, how he woke up, couldn't move. The darkness filled the room, and then the final vision of the old woman sitting on his chest. His sisters and brothers sat enthralled, their breakfast forgotten. His mother frowned, but his father looked grim and began to shake his head. "I'm sorry to tell you, Andy, but that was no dream." "Now, Joe," began his wife, but he silenced her with a look. Andy's mouth fell open, and he stared at his father. It wasn't? Wild thoughts came tumbling into his head. Was there an old woman staying in the house that he didn't know about? Some dreadful old woman who came into his room in the middle of the night? A witch who put a spell on him so he couldn't move? He didn't understand. It was true. It hadn't felt like a dream. He felt it. He felt that he was wide awake the whole time. "What was it then?" Andy said, afraid of the answer. "The old hag," said his father solemnly. "You have been visited by the old hag." "Now, Joe, don't be frightening the boy," protested his mother. "He needs to know," said his father. "I've had the old hag visit me many a time, as well you know. The old hag is a particular Newfoundland ghost, and there's all kinds of people been haunted by her. She might come back, and he needs to know what to do." "What? What can I do?" said Andy, looking wildly around the room, as if the old hag was going to suddenly appear again. "Oh, for goodness sake," said his mother, standing up and starting to clear away the breakfast dishes. "Such nonsense." Andy's brothers and sisters sat still, rapt, listening to every word. "Well, there's three things you can do," began his father, ignoring his wife. "First of all, if you can move some part of your body, even just a little, that will break the spell and she'll disappear." "That happened," cried Andy. "I moved my baby finger and then she was gone." "Very good," said his father, nodding his head. "You can also say your name backwards." "What?" "Backwards. Say your name backwards. Instead of Andy Rose, say Rose Andy. That will send her on her way." Andy wondered how he could possibly remember to do that. Or, "Wait till she's right on top of you and look her in the face and tell her you're not scared of her. That's the best way to get rid of the old hag once and for all." "But I am scared of her. I've never been more scared of my life. She was trying to kill you. She was trying to kill me." "Well, she won't kill you. You just have to face her no matter how scared you are, look her in the eyes, and then she loses her power and you can move." "I'm not scared of her," said his little sister Doris. "Me neither," said his big brother Steve. Andy knew they wouldn't be so brave if they'd been through what he had been the night before. He looked down at his cereal, soggy, now in a pond of milk. He didn't feel like eating. One thing was worrying him, but he couldn't say it. How was he ever going to go to sleep again, knowing that she might come back? Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Do you know what's so weird about this story when I read it?
Tell me.
I read it for the first time after I wrote my little intro to you
Mm-hmm.
about the old hag.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice and interesting to know that other people experience it so like specifically. And also they have it just as I was reading it, I was like, it is so funny because once I stopped being scared in the dreams, that's when they
Mm-hmm.
stop as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the similarities between what you like the intro that you said like at the very beginning and also like you explaining your experiences with old hags, like the similarities of that to that story, which is someone's someone else's entirely their
Yeah.
experience or interpretation.
So it
What?
is a true story, and
Oh.
the names were changed. So it was told to the storyteller by Rick Clark
Hmm.
in Corner Brook.
Hmm.
And they give like a little history, the story behind the story about the place and the ghost, and it's really cool. It's a beautiful book, and I think we should link it so people can pick it up.
Yeah. I'm wondering if Rick was
Mhm.
like Andy, the little boy, or if he was the
Yes, Rick
dad.
was Andy.
Okay.
Rick was Andy because he talked about how um terrifying it was and how he got rid of her.
Hmm.
And that is by facing her and telling her that he is not afraid.
Interesting.
Yeah. I
What
think
does
he
she
was 10 years
want?
old.
Just to create terror?
I don't know what she wants, but isn't it crazy that like so many people, especially people who haven't heard of this specific
Hmm.
like image before, like Andy had never heard, or Rick Clark had never heard about the old hag until after he had one. And yet he still had this image of an old woman, an old hag. And like,
Hmm.
I know it's a universal experience, and that by that logic, everyone should have the image of an old hag, but like maybe there's a spirit in Newfoundland that is an old hag and visiting certain people, like maybe that's a thing.
Does it only happen to Newfoundlanders?
No, it also, I think other places, I think southern US also describe and may even refer to it as the old hag.
Mm.
Um, but it does spread out a little bit. But other people obviously will have just, the man wearing the golden fez or
Hmm.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what really kind of skeeved me out from that story, or like made me feel icky, which you did describe. You also described it, but I think just it maybe sometimes I have to hear things twice for it to really land, was when he woke up and he was like looking around his room expecting it to be the same. And he was conscious
Yeah.
and everything, it didn't feel the same. Like it felt like his light was dull and like,
Yeah. Slightly different. Icky.
and it's like, does it take the energy? Like, cause I've been watching so much Ghost Adventures
Yeah.
with Carly. And we're only on like season 9 of 28. But you know how ghosts have to like take energy, like they need energy from some
Yeah.
source to be able to talk or to appear or to communicate in any way. At least that's sort of what like sort of us humans that are alive, that's our best way of explaining it. Like, what do we actually really know? Probably nothing. But so if we're assuming that the old hag is an old spirit, or different areas of the world have the equivalent of that, and it's just an old spirit that haunts people when they're sleeping, it's like when he woke up and he looked around his room, or like you described something similar, and things were just off, is it because the old hag had to take so much of the energy from
Mm.
its surrounding area
To form.
to
Yeah.
be able to, and then once it like was gone, it took a while for the things to kind of go back to the way they were before it came.
Maybe, maybe.
Maybe.
Also, in the story, I'm just thinking of this now, the fact that it was a full moon. I wonder if there's ever been like a large scale study that like documented instances of someone having these old hags
Mm.
and whether it happens more frequently when there's a full moon or like whenever there's
Hmm.
something like that going on.
Well, one thing I was going to ask, which I forgot, like I meant to jot it down, but then you maybe have said something else, and then I started writing something else and forgot to go back to it. But that just reminded me. How often would you say you've had these?
Hmm. A couple a year.
Okay. Are they ever connected in any way? Because, like you say, you feel this dark feeling of dread and
Yeah.
um, are they, has, like, if you were to go over the last decade of jotting down, trying to remember the different ones you had and when you had them, or if you started that process now for the next several years, I wonder if there's a correlation in any way, shape, or form to something bad happening IRL. Like there's this
Like I had
dread.
a bad stressful day and then had an old hag.
No, not like that. I mean, possibly, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like someone that you know was going to get sick, or
Oh,
there was going to be an accident, or someone died, or like something, whatever. Maybe that's too big, but just something happened that would ultimately fill you with dread. And
hmm.
that was like a preemptive, like what if it's a preemptive warning?
I haven't noticed anything. Nothing sticks out in my head at all.
But would you have known to think to make the connection?
Yes, I make connections all the time. But I can take note. I can take note. But also, now I'm able to more frequently interact with the dream or the state or the whatever, and I'm less, that feeling of terror is subsiding. So I think that feeling of terror is less about what's happening or less about something being done to you and more about like, yeah, you don't know what's going on and you can't move
Mm-hmm.
because you're like
Mm-hmm.
stuck there, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure. But also the human mind is has an amazing way of like lessening like traumatic events.
This is true.
So like I'll
This is
say,
true.
oh, insert terrible traumatic childhood story here. And so,
That's
but
just the way
that's
things go.
yeah, that's the way that's how it goes. Not that big of a deal. And then Carly will be like, no, that was something.
That's,
That is not good. That was a bad thing that you
oh,
had to deal with.
I mean, of course, there's just four little people standing at the end of my bed. Of course, they're coming. I had to resort to humor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's coping. Like somehow subconsciously you've learned to cope, which like good because if you have no control over the fact that an old hag's going to come or impact you, then it's good to know you have some way of coping with it. But like, yeah, I don't know. That's just another way of looking at it, I guess.
Hmm. And it definitely doesn't just happen when you're having stress either.
No.
Like I've had like a sunny afternoon nap on the couch, and it happened during one of those as well.
Hmm. In fact,
But
I would think
definitely
it.
on my back. I have not had one where I'm not on my back.
And you see, that's so interesting. Like I think I would say like probably 75% side sleeper, but I do sleep on my back and I often fall asleep on my back. And yet I've never had one.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
But
that's my
I say you
story.
said probably not stress related, but it's probably the opposite. Like when you are feeling relaxed, it's more inclined to probably happen because you're
to pop right
more.
out and say like, here I am, bitch. Got an old hag for you. You ready for this?
Yeah, or just kind of like maybe you have to get to that certain level of relaxation to be attuned to that energy. It's like, okay, she's relaxed and calm,
Yeah.
so I can get through here. I can present myself.
And I will tell you, I definitely had more while I was pregnant.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, definitely. Definitely had more while I was pregnant.
Hmm.
That's in fact where the little people
Mm,
and the one with like all of my dead family members were there.
right. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Watching over Franny. They were like, we're here. We're fine. We're watching her.
Yeah, that seems kind of nice. But what was
It
the
was
with the little
lovely.
people? What were they doing?
John interrupted it. I don't know, but
They were coming
I
to give you some very important information that you had to pass along to your child, and John just
they're here. They're here, John. Could you imagine your partner
no,
waking up in the middle of the night with like a
no.
horrified like and then just being like, they're here. They're coming.
Yeah, no.
Like
I would
he
shake Carly awake.
I don't know how this fucking man went back to sleep after that. I'd be like, you're sleeping with duct tape over your mouth after this. I can't do that again.
Well, here's the thing is that like if that happened and I was able to get Carly awake and then she's like, "Oh, it must have just been just dreaming or I don't know." Then I'd be like, "Okay, well then we're fine. Let's go back to sleep." No real actual concern. But if it was like
Yeah,
they're here and then I hear someone rummaging around in my house, that's a different story. I'm not going to go to sleep as easily.
no. Well, it was neither of those things. It was just like they're here, they're coming. John, can't you see them? And then like I just went back to sleep.
Oh, so he didn't wake you up.
Well,
Because
what do you
I'd be
mean by
like,
wake me up? Because I was up, like I was transitioning to
oh,
wakefulness.
okay. Well, I think
Yeah.
I would have had more of a conversation. I'd been like, what?
Yeah, no, he didn't. That's what I'm saying. Like he didn't. He was like, I don't want to get into this. Back to sleep.
That's so stupid. Is John listening to this now? Are you allowing him to?
That man can do what he wants.
Is he our lucky number seven?
Maybe. I'll ask
Also,
him.
let's get real. He can't do what he wants. There's
No, he
like
cannot.
there's like what Kim wants slash needs and what Franny wants slash needs. And then below that, what John wants and John needs.
Well, you've missed what Luna and
Oh,
Kitty.
of course. How could I forget?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
on the
they
to I don't want to say totem pole, that's not correct. On the ladder.
the
Let's say the
ladder
ladder.
on the ladder, the love ladder.
On the love ladder. Well, no, because like you love John just like as much, but it's like when it comes to whose priorities and needs, like he's the bottom rung.
The Maslow's hierarchy of family
Yes.
needs in
And
our
I can say
family.
that in case John is listening. He's like, hey, what the fuck? Because I am the lowest rung of my family ladder. Carly is the matriarch. She's right on the top.
Yeah.
Then Nimble,
Yeah.
then Precious, and then me.
Yeah.
It's just how it goes.
I like it. We should
Yeah.
draw a little family hierarchy of need representations
Mhm.
and give it
Definitely.
to, yeah, okay. I'm tired,
But
so
but what I
I'm
like about that, about being in that spot, is that
okay.
it just says that I'm an extremely caring, loving person who wants to give of myself to the people that I love. Their needs are important.
Sure.
My needs are important too, but like their needs are important.
It's a
And that's
good
nice.
place to be.
It's
It's a good
nice.
place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should wrap this bitch up because I'm gonna go tuck myself into bed and
Hmm.
hope to God that I haven't triggered an old hag, but I would
Mm.
love to have triggered an alternate reality dream
Well, hopefully.
because those are sick.
Why are you up so early
That's my
tomorrow?
fucking life. That is my life.
Oh, okay.
John goes on the train tomorrow,
Hmm.
and my daughter will get up at 6:30 or 7, and I have to be ready before her.
Hmm.
So I get up, I get ready. It is a fucking blitz. Then I get her ready. Then I drive her 20 minutes to school. Then I drive 30 minutes to work. Then I work a blitz, and then I drive home, or I drive to pick her up. Then I drive home,
And then
and
you
then we
do the
eat dinner. She goes
podcast.
to bed. Yeah,
Yeah. What a wild ride.
it's a wild fucking ride, man.
Yeah.
It's a
All
wild
right.
ride.
Well, a goodbye.
Sweet dreams.
Yeah. Sweet old Hags.